resilience in Central America. First of all, I would like to thank the International Development Finance Club for hosting this event at Glasgow in the COP. As well, I would like to thank the co-organizers of this event, the Central American Commission for Environmental and Development, CCAD, or in Spanish, CCAD, the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, and the Green Climate Fund. It's an honor to have on this panel virtually Jacqueline Alvarez, Regional Director at UNEP. We have as well Kavita Singha, Deputy Director of the Division of Mitigation and Adaptation at the Green Climate Fund. Miguel Mendez, Head of Partnership and International Cooperation of CABEI. And we have the honor of having the Minister of Environment of Panama and next pro tempore President of the Council of Ministers of the Environment of Central America, Milciades Concepcion, and the Vice Minister of Natural Resources and Climate Change of Guatemala, Vice Minister Freddy Chiroy. I welcome the audience as well, and thank you for participating in this very important session for the Central American region and the world. As you might know, Central American Dry Corridor is one of the most arid zones that it's vulnerable on the tropical regions to the impacts and the effects of climate change. Climate projections for the region indicate temperatures will increase and annual rainfall will decrease. These changes will be intensified by further changes that we call El Niño and La Niña cycle, resulting in prolonged droughts and more frequent and extreme rainfall events across the region. As the dry corridor area constitutes a significant portion of Central America population and productive life, this will have severe consequences for the agriculture and food security in the region. The program, Ecosystem-Based Adaptation to Increase Climate Resilience in the Central American Dry Corridor and the arid zones of Dominican Republic, implemented by the Central American Bank for Economic Integration, CABEI, aims to strengthen the adaptive capacity and climate resilience of vulnerable and rural communities. This includes farmers and entrepreneurs in the dry corridor region. This includes the following countries: Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Panama, and Dominican Republic. We are very pleased to highlight in this session how financial solutions and technical assistance are going to support the region through this program and will encourage private sector participation and create an enabling environment for the investments and uptake of large-scale ecosystem-based adaptation and water energy efficiency technologies. Now, I would like to welcome our panel members and the audience that is very interested to hear from this paradigm-shifting program that has a value of $268.4 million with 174 million approved and supported by the Green Climate Fund. Last but not least, it's worth to mention that this program will benefit a total of 2.4 million people in Central America and Dominican Republic. With that, I would like to open now to Jacqueline Alvarez, Regional Director at the United Nations Environmental Program. And we would like, Jacqueline, for you to share with your panel members and the audience the climate variability and vulnerability of the Central American region linked to climate change. Jacqueline, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, we can hear you.
So it's an honor to be with all of you this afternoon or this day for those of you that are in this part of the world, in Latin America and the Caribbean region. And I will start, if you allow me, by asking you to include the PowerPoint. I have some slides I would like to share with you. Thank you. So the conversation with you today is in relation to Central America, but I would like maybe to start very quickly what we have heard in the last weeks regarding the emissions gap report for 2030. As you might have heard several times and through different media, new pledges lower global greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 by 7.5% compared to prior pledges. But to get on track to the 2 grade centigrades, a 30% reduction is needed. 7.5 against 30%. But if we really want to get on track for the 1.5 Celsius degrees, we need to have a 55 reduction. What I'm trying to say is that the impact on droughts, on wildfire, on food, on coasts, on nature are really huge, depending where we are. And it is not an issue of 1 degree or 2 degrees. It's an issue of life. It's an issue of future. And I will give you an example on food in the global level, and then I will go to this particular region, which is of high interest and of high vulnerability. So impact on food. If we are talking about 1.5 degrees, wheat, rice, maize, production will suffer. But if we go into the 3 degrees Celsius, local fish species go extinct. What can we say about that? A lot. In particular, because food and fish are part of the diets. So if you go, please, to the next slide. So what can you see here? This slide is showing, in a way, a climate crisis, but the countries of Central America and the Caribbean are more vulnerable than the rest of Latin America. And why? And that's due to a combination of factors, such as the occurrence of extreme weather events, the smallness of the territories, the relatively limited economic infrastructure, and the tight fiscal situation. High exposure and sensitivity of the region results in impacts on agriculture and critical infrastructure for the region. Central America depends on nature for generation of energy. With worsening droughts, climate change puts the energy sovereignty at risk. Electricity transmission systems are unfortunately highly vulnerable to climate events, with major effects on the entire economy. There are also impacts on roads, infrastructure in cities, and what does that mean? Migration? Does that mean also health problems and issues? Unfortunately, it does. Adaptation to extreme weather events and sea level rise is really talking about a range of things. And this goes from generating information to financial protection and public participation. In these countries, ecosystem-based adaptation plays a particular important role in protecting the coastlines. In turn, in some cases, adaptation actions are inseparably from mitigation actions, as in the case of mangrove and coral remediation and urban densification. Investments in adaptations, like all investment, has multiple layers and multiple effects on the rest of the economy. It is essentially preventive and offers an opportunity not only to reduce the negative impact of climate change, but also to narrow development gaps and boosts economies. The report of the Global Commission on Adaptation, the 2019 one, led by Ban Ki-moon, notes that adaptation investments have a very high total rate of return. The cost-benefit ratio is 2 to 1, from 2 to 1 to 10 to 1. In some cases, it's even higher. Please, the next slide. What are we talking here about? It's economic crisis. Vulnerability to climate change not only has negative consequences for the population of Latin America and the Caribbean in general, but also affects the risk profile attributed to countries at the international level, limiting their capacity to access credit. So finance will not be available. The susceptibility index issued by global rating agencies, and in this case by Moody, depends on the risk of extreme weather situations and events. That affects financial stability in Central America, and you can see that in the map. Per the colors, you can see how Central America's countries are most susceptible to this change. Going into the next slide, please. As I was starting to say at the beginning of the presentation, the humanitarian crisis is around the corner. A high vulnerability of this region and the shocks generated by the COVID and the hurricanes in 2020 add to the serious humanitarian crisis that Central America is already currently experiencing. Climate variability has been recognized as possible triggers for migration. You know that as well. And what I was referring also at the beginning of this presentation related to food insecurity, that is linked to drought episodes. And here we are talking particularly about that area. Disasters contribute to medium-term migration. Next slide. So where are we now in here? I will let you see this one in a few moments and just ask you to relate to those issues. We have droughts and water shortages. That is what we have been hearing. But we also will have most serious pests and disasters. We have experienced with the COVID-19 situation that can really make a collapse in our health systems, in our hospitals. So what does this mean when we are also facing the issue of pests and disasters that might not be controlled and managed? Reduced agricultural possibilities and losses, it's also a huge issue. Change in forest composition, what does that mean? We need to protect the forest. But this can also be linked not only to droughts, but also to severe flooding. So changes in crop suitability might really be an issue of high concern. It is a real issue of high concern. The next slide, please. So do we have benefits in investing in adaptation? Yes, we do. And in particular, for every dollar invested in adaptation, we can gain 4. So it's 1 to 4. 1 investment, 4 from benefit. Taking into account, of course, avoided losses. Investment in adaptation achieves both short and long-term co-benefits. In addition to economic benefits, quality and inclusive jobs can be generated. People's health and quality of life can be improved, and ecosystem services can be restored. So we are seeing here the 3 dimensions of sustainable development. The 2030 agenda put really in the core of our actions. So investing in adaptations really outweighed the costs. The next slide. So what can we say for Central America? Dominican Republic, Panama are 2 countries well above this percentage in the region. And you can see that in the slide that it's being projected at this moment. And they are examples to follow in addressing the COVID-19 crisis with sustainable measures. You can also see there Costa Rica, for its part. It's also a great example as it has a track record of sustainability policies beyond the pandemic of COVID-19. There is a need to change the flow of investments to ensure sustainability and inclusive development, and that will help address health, climate, economic, and humanitarian crises in this region in particular. The next slide, please. So what can or are strategic priorities for responding to climate change in Central America? You'll see there three underlined ones, but this will require really a revolution in the thinking. So developing risk analysis capacity in both the public and private sectors is key. Understanding the risks from a system perspective rather than in an isolated way or thinking only of one sector in front of the other. Improved and more integrated planning, considering the potential impact of climate change at the appropriate scale for each sector and going beyond the planning, going beyond the local, the provincial, the sectoral, but working with them. And last but not least, of course, the financing, analyzing the costs of the climate crisis and investment needs and thinking about financial mechanisms that are needed to implement the climate actions is at the core. It's necessary. As an example, developing concrete projects and investments is a priority within sectors, within geographical spaces, within countries, within the region. Next slide, please. So what is the role of the different sectors? In particular, I'd like to start with governments, and governments have a key role to play in creating the conditions and enabling environments that can help align financial flows. Governments must give clear signals to the financial sector to attract investment. For its part, the financial sector needs to investigate what investments are also good to follow. Those that has a lot of climate risk might not be the ones to look for or the ones to support. Integrated assessments into investment portfolios is a must. Finally, new instruments such as maybe, for example, bonds, debt swaps, and climate insurance should be created to eliminate the investment risk generated by the climate crisis and align the financial sector with the Paris Agreement. The EU has a role to play in regulating and shaping its financial market, both nationally and internationally. And we have seen that any action that is taken at the local level can really have impacts at the global level and the other way around. This is essential to align finance with objectives, in this case of the Paris Agreement. New public policy mechanisms and financial sector reforms under the leadership of regulators, superintendencies, central banks, ministers of finance are key, but ministers of environment also have a huge role to play. They are the ones to set the agenda in cooperation and coordination with others. Don't forget the need to work not in silos, but all together. Next slide, please. Key actors to align the financial flow. You will see here as well that public and private investments are really needed. We are talking about mitigation, we are talking about adaptation, but we are also talking about intersectoral approaches. Activities, there are some been mentioned for this region to really address. So the last slide I have, and if you can go there, please. So now I'm coming into some conclusions for us to bear in mind when this conversation continues. This region, Central America, has really shown vulnerability because not only of the impacts of the climate change, but of the pandemic. The combined result of that is really showing that the region needs to take the lead in developing the next steps. Economic revival also needs a transformation, and that transformation needs to be resilient, but needs to be sustainable as well. Enabling environment, market signals are needed. The finance sector needs to follow, needs to help into the adaptation and mitigation initiatives. Scaling up action, you have heard that too many times. So some priorities, understanding climate is one real issue. It's very important to really know where we can make a difference, where we can shift the needle. Sound adaptation planning, financing priority investments. A change in the flow of investment has a potential not only to help the environment and the future, but today to stop the humanitarian crisis in Central America while addressing climate economic crisis as well as biodiversity loss and pollution. Thank you very much.
Very much, Jacqueline, for your intervention. It has been very enlightening to have a better picture of Central America and the vulnerabilities of climate change. Please stay with us so at the end we can ask you some follow-up questions. Now I'm going to go directly to the panel that is present in Glasgow. So I would like to ask two questions to Kavita Sinha. So dear Deputy Director of the Division of Mitigation and Adaptation at the Green Climate Fund, it's a pleasure to have you on this panel. Thank you for attending. And we will appreciate if you can explain briefly to the audience some of the most important highlights of the GCF for those that are not aware. And we also believe it could be of relevance for you to explain the importance and added value of having such programs such as this one that make use of different financial instruments that the GCF offers to their accredited entities, such as grants, loans, and guarantees. So could you please complement your explanation with the example of the dry corridor, illustrating how this blending mechanism that the GCF offers was undertaken and was one of the most attractive factors for the GCF to approve $174 million. Kavita, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel, and thank you for the invitation to speak about this topic. I'm very happy to talk a little bit about GCF as you've asked, and also explain why GCF took the anchor investor position on the Dry Corridor project. So GCF, as you know, was set up as the financing mechanism of the UNFCCC. Today, GCF is the largest climate finance fund available. We have, by the end of October, we have now $10 billion of projects in commitment across multiple projects, about 190 of them, of which $6.1 billion of projects are under implementation. The total value of projects of which GCF has directly invested is $37 billion, which includes, of course, the co-financing from our partners who are implementing those projects. GCF is aware that GCF's mandate is to support a low-resilient climate, low-emission climate resilient development in developing countries. And our mandate is to enable that the blended finance works for the most vulnerable people, the LDCs, the SIDS, and Africa. Our commitment is to ensure that 50% of our funding goes to adaptation. So we try and maintain a portfolio level balance of 50% mitigation and 50% adaptation. The new updated strategic plan that was adopted in November by our board mandates that we increase our contribution to the fund flowing directly through direct access entities, such as CABEI. We're proud to have CABEI as one of our partners. We also have a commitment under the updated strategic plan to increase the mobilization of private finance, with the recognition that no amount of public finance is able to meet the humanitarian crisis that we just heard about. the fund required, the amount of financing that's flowing for climate finance is around $600 billion at this place, based on estimates by the Climate Policy Initiative. However, what is needed by 2040 is $6 trillion. So that's a humongous increase in funding. No amount of public finance can meet that. How can we enable, through patient capital, patient high-risk capital, such as what GCF brings to the table, to enable private sector to invest? Private sector has mobilized itself to invest very well in mitigation, but in the adaptation side, the fund flows is not adequate. So our attempt is through the GCF is to enable using our high-value risk capital to catalyze private sector to invest in it, especially making it possible to invest those areas which are highly vulnerable. So how does GCF do that? We follow a four-pronged approach. It was talked about earlier about holistic planning and policy. So our first prong for a paradigm shift towards adaptation is an integrated policy planning. We believe that if the governments have long-term planning that integrates sustainable development goal financing, the climate impact and climate ambition financing, as well as the economic recovery from COVID financing in an integrated manner, capital efficiency improves quite significantly. Up to 40% reduction in total outlay of finance will be achieved as a result of this integrated holistic planning. GCF's financing, such as readiness grant and project preparatory facilities, enable the countries to be able to do such integrated planning. It also enables countries to convert their NDCs and NAPs to a group of bankable projects. Because at the end of the day, finance capital from the private sector is looking to be able to develop bankable projects. So GCF's project preparation and readiness grants enable converting the NDC and NAP aspirations and ambitions into bankable projects. The second prong is catalyzing innovation. A lot of innovation capital is flowing into developed countries. It's also, among developing countries, it's currently restricted to largely emerging economies and large countries. It is not flowing to the most vulnerable, and it's definitely not adequately flowing to the adaptation technologies. So in order to do that, GCF is financing projects that enable small entrepreneurs all the way from micro enterprises to large enterprises to access the same level of financing that a developed country economy might have, also financing technology transfer, also looking at the possibility of financing what's called an ecosystem of innovation, which is accelerators and incubation facilities. Recently, we have put a funding of about $1.5 million, very small amount of funding. It's a project preparation facility with the Korean Development Bank as an example that is focused on catalyzing innovation in countries of Southeast Asia. We are hoping that we can set up similar adaptation facilities for incubation and acceleration in other parts of the world soon as well. The third pronged approach, which most people know GCF mostly about, is scaling up finance. And we do that through a variety of ways. The first one is people are talking about here is blending the finance. The blended finance comes in three different, the concession that we provide comes in three different forms. One is the interest rate concessions for the loans, but there is also the two other concessions that are often not taken into account during discussion is the tenor. For public sector finance, we can provide a tenor up to 40 years. And there's also grace period. So for commercial banks or for development banks or private sector investors, using either these or our other instruments such as grants, guarantees, or equity, these can be deployed in a variety of ways to enable other investors to invest where they might otherwise not invest. So our equity can be invested. We can bring in equity as a subordinate equity, which means we don't take the first waterfall of the profits that might come. Our senior superior equity providers can take that. So we take a junior position in equity to enable other financiers to crowd in after us And we often take what we call is an anchor position. So we are the first one to make investments, again, such as in the dry corridor. And that encourages others to then follow behind us. Similarly, even on the loan, we do senior loans, sovereign loans, but we also do junior loans, which means then that enables other senior loan providers to come in behind us. Grants, we do both grants as non-reimbursable grants and also as reimbursable grants. So we have a variety of instruments, can be purpose-fit and customized to the needs of the project. We heard about that adaptation projects have a very high economic rate of return. However, financiers need financial returns. So the bridging the gap between financial returns and the economic return is what the GCF's blended concessional funds can do. So how do we deploy that most strategically so that it bridges the gap between economic returns, which the economy-wide sees, but the externalities cannot be captured by the private investors, and how do we put that? So that's our third prong. And our fourth and final prong is something what we are doing here, it is knowledge sharing and catalyzing the feedback loops that are necessary. There is no time left for us to make mistakes and for others not to learn from it. Innovation requires trying something out. Both failures and successes are important lessons for others to learn so that the next investment that is made is better placed to do that. So we are hoping that we will create feedback loops through this collaboration and improve the capital efficiency and flows. In that sense, coming to the dry corridor, that project really fits all the four prongs very, very well. One, it fits our mandate on the updated strategic plan of adaptation. Adaptation, as we heard, is a multi-dimensional vulnerability issues. And this project has elements that are customized for different vulnerable groups. It has the customization with non-reimbursable components for the most vulnerable, the smallholder farmers and the smaller communities or the micro enterprise. It has reimbursable components, which is largely loan and guarantees for those enterprises which can actually scale up and improve using new products for adaptation. And these are largely through the local commercial banks through which CABEI will be transferring these funds to on-lending for enterprises which have the credit rating and the ability to use these funds to bring it forward back. So our $174 million that we have invested in has about $90 million as the reimbursable component and $84 million as the non-reimbursable component. Within the non-reimbursable component, it also recognizes the need for capacity building and technical assistance to ensure that there's a good, strong pipeline of bankable projects that get funded. Even if it is in the beginning purely grant funded, the idea is to link the people who are not banked today to come to the banking system, to the formal system. So that is what the grant is doing. So a combination of grant for investment component, technical assistance component, will then hopefully, in a period of time, make them bankable customers and they can switch over. We are hoping that this will enable private sector to crowd in. We also do what we call sequencing of risks. When we believe that this is the first type of a project that's coming in with highest risk, if it demonstrates success, the next projects that will come in may not need our funding. It can have private sector. So with that, I would like to conclude saying we're very proud and very happy to be supporting the Dry Corridor project, one of the most needed. These sort of projects are very needed. It comes at a time where update and meets all the dimensions of a strategic plan. It is through direct access entities, it is for adaptation, it is mobilizing private sector capital, and it is trying to balance geography, so it is in the Latin American Caribbean region. So thank you so very much for the opportunities. Happy to answer questions later if needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kavita. That was very clear, and I think it was really important to highlight how the GCF, that it's in a way different to other climate funds, because we do not only offer grants, but as well this ability to blend other types of instruments, such as equity, loans, and guarantees. Now, I would like to speak to Miguel Mendez. So, dear Miguel, Head of Partnership and International Cooperation at CABEI. Well, first of all, congratulations to your institution as an example of a direct access entity at the GCF for providing this type of ambitious support to multiple countries that need so much help on adaptation measures. Could you please explain to the audience how this Central American Bank and this program of the Dry Corridor as a regional initiative will increase climate resilience in Central America region and Dominican Republic and become one of the main examples of adaptation and resilience benefiting the livelihoods of people and vulnerable communities? We would like to hear more details from you, Miguel. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks all of you for being here. Good afternoon, and also in this case, I would like to start saying that CABEI is really committed to support our country members to address climate change issues. And we did this commitment included in our mission and also in our strategy. And in that regard, we have been supporting the countries to deal with this kind of financing. And as a result of that, we already got approved project for 6.9 million US dollars that are reducing or trying to address climate change operations. In that regard, this represents 41% of CABEI's commitment in our portfolio, in the approval portfolio. So this fact basically is a great, how we say, sorry, I'm too tired now. Yeah, now it's Friday. This really shows this commitment that CABEI has with our country members. Why is this? Because as you may know, all people know here in the previous presentation highlight the high vulnerability that the Central American region has to climate change effects. So we need to make important efforts in order to address this. Because this is not only about resilience, it's also about poverty level. So definitely the poverty levels in the dry corridor zone are higher in the region. And with the climate change events affecting this are deepening these problems in the region. And what happened with this? So there are social problems, for instance, migration, and we saw now there is a great crisis on that. So in that regard, CABEI will continue supporting the countries in this journey. And I would like to address some additional things regarding the dry corridor. So the dry corridor for us is a flagship project as well, because it shows regional efforts. And of course, regional efforts demands a lot of coordination. And here is very important to highlight also the great support from the countries, from the CCAD, in the CCAD, because they show the commitment, I think, since 5 or 4 years ago with this initiative, and we started it. So it was really, really a long process, but it is a process that has results at this moment, and we hope this will be higher in the coming years. This is one thing. The other thing is that we also talk about how to involve private sector. Yeah, and this program will have the great opportunity to mobilize private sector resources to the project. One more thing that is very important to say is about the impact. So we mentioned about 2.7 million people will be impacted by this program, and this impact will be in the poorest region of our countries. And this is one of the initiatives that we are doing, and unfortunately, this initiative will not solve the problem. Yeah, so the problem is really big. It's bigger than this. So some days ago, some weeks ago, we received the report for the Ipcc. And then basically for the region, what it states is that the issues regarding climate change adaptation will be worse, will be worse in the coming years. So in that regard, CABEI continue supporting that, and that's why we as CABEI in 2020, we launched a program which is really focused on adaptation measures. And this program is like an umbrella program for a 2.5 billion US dollar, which also will support the countries to address these climate change issues. So, and what components does the program has? So one is emergency resources. So when a hurricane happens, so we need to respond immediately. So, and this is how we can do as CABEI, but also this component will be open for other partners that want to support these emergency events to put money to support this. The second one, which is, I think is addressing a big issue in the formulation of projects, is especially the resources to formulate projects. So in this case, we set up a fund for project preparation that will support the countries to get non-reimbursable resources to get this investment and prepare the projects for being financed later. And then the third and the fourth component basically are the development of a public and private program that will be the way that we will implement it in the countries. And what is important as well is that CABEI cannot do it alone. So in that regard, we appreciate a lot the collaboration of institutions like Green Climate Fund in order to mobilize additional resources to complement what we can do. Thank you for that, Kavita. And one more important thing here is that also we need the support from other organizations. So this project, the dry corridor, for instance, is a good example of how other institutions work together for that. So in this case, we can start with the political level, with the CCAD leading this initiative, but in second place, we can also talk about UN Environment, who already put their technical inputs in order to formulate the program. And last but not least, we have now the involvement of the FAO for the project implementation, because we can congratulate now about the project, but the approval of the project, but at the end, what is important is the implementation. Impact will be after the implementation. So in that regard, we are partnering with other institutions like FAO to support this implementation and make it happen and get the result that we really need to do that. And just to finalize, it's important to say that we can mobilize resources from GCF and others, but also we need to go to the capital markets as well. So, and in that regard, we have been making, we are making many efforts on issuance of green bonds, social bonds, that will support us to finance these projects. But not only what CABEI can bring to the table, but also we are working on how to support local institutions to issue bonds in order to get resources from local and international markets. And why is important local markets? Because at the end, we need also local currency. So then this reduces the risk for the financial institutions and also and the cost for the end users. So to finalize, I would want to thank again all the participation of the CCAD, the UNEP, GCF, and the FAO as the institution that will support us in the implementation for this achievement that we already have so far. But then the challenge is how to get impact. And I hope 5 years later from now, we can say we are on track in order to achieve the achievement that we already proposed. Thank you very much.
Very much, Miguel, for your intervention. And I believe it's useful to highlight some of the facts that you mentioned and Capita as well. This project one is an example because it's a direct access entity supported by governments through CCAD, but as well by international accredited entities to the GCF. That's one of the main mandates of the GCF, is to prove that direct access entities, national or regionals, can access direct the resources. But even accepting that they can complement their efforts, in this case, bringing the technical capacity from UNEP and FAO. That would be the first great highlight of this program. The second one is that CABEI, as we might know, it's accredited to bigger standards than, in this case, the UN agencies. CABEI has access to larger resources. They have access to different categories of environmental and social risks, but as well to different financial instruments. And this program is proving how a direct access entities that get accredited to larger and more ambitious instruments is using them in an adaptation program benefiting multiple countries. That's a great example for other entities accredited to the fund that are implementing projects or developing projects in other regions. It's really good, Miguel, to highlight as well that the strategy of the bank itself has focused on sustainability and climate change. I encourage the audience to take a look into the strategy of CABEI from 2020 to 2024, how in all that strategy is highlighted sustainability linked to climate change. With that 3 points that I was thinking was worth it to highlight, I'm going to switch into Spanish so our Minister and Vice Minister of Panama and Guatemala will feel a little bit more comfortable. And as we're speaking of the Central American region, I believe a lot of the audience hopefully understands Spanish. Estimado Ministro de Medio Ambiente de Panamá y Viceministro de Recursos Naturales y Cambio Climático de Guatemala. Voy a hacerles las mismas 2 preguntas a los dos para que no haya una diferencia, digamos, en sus intervenciones, pero podamos escuchar sus puntos de vista. La primera pregunta es que nos gustaría que compartan con la audiencia su opinión sobre la importancia de colaboración regional para lograr, obviamente, este tipo de programas tan fundamentales para reducir las vulnerabilidades al cambio climático. ¿Cuáles son los resultados que esperan ustedes ver en la región del corredor seco gracias a los recursos y el apoyo del Fondo Verde del Clima, del Banco Centroamericano de Integración Económica, el PNUMA, la FAO y CCAD? Después de responder a esta pregunta sobre la importancia de la colaboración regional, nos gustaría escuchar desde el punto de vista nacional de cada uno de sus países cómo están incorporando planes, estrategias y acciones concretas a nivel nacional para reducir la vulnerabilidad al cambio climático. Para empezar, ministro de Medio Ambiente de Panamá, Milciades Concepción, le doy la palabra. Adelante.
Buenas tardes. Gracias a todos los presentes, los que están en vivo a través de internet, a los panelistas. Realmente la visión que tenemos los países centroamericanos sobre cómo hacerle frente a los efectos del cambio climático y cómo incrementar la resiliencia en Centroamérica, lo estamos enfrentando en equipo a través del sistema centroamericano, el SICA, y a través específicamente donde participamos todos los ministros de Ambiente, la Comisión Centroamericana de Ambiente y de Desarrollo, la CCAD. Es importante ratificar que la región centroamericana es altamente vulnerable a las amenazas por los efectos del cambio climático y que por sus características de su ubicación geográfica, alto índice de pobreza y déficits sociales, es muy sensitivo pues a estos efectos, a los huracanes que pasan por el Caribe. Y solamente en el 2020, hace poco, recibimos los embates de los efectos de los huracanes ETA y IOTA, que produjeron más de 200 muertos en la región, más de 7 millones de personas afectadas y pérdidas por más de 2.600 millones de dólares en daños materiales. Estos fenómenos, estos impactos, representan una amenaza muy seria a la región, a la seguridad alimentaria, que también se generan migraciones humanas hacia el norte y afecta la dinámica socioeconómica, las finanzas públicas y la gobernanza de la región. El Ipcc señala que la región presenta un aumento progresivo de las temperaturas extremas, inundaciones recurrentes, pérdida de zonas costeras, intrusiones salinas, ascenso del nivel del mar y olas de calor, entre otros. Todo esto incrementa la pérdida de gran parte de nuestro capital natural y la capacidad de enfrentar nuevos eventos externos, sumado al enorme impacto de la pandemia COVID-19. Todos estos factores han hecho que los 2 últimos años sean muy duros, fuertes para la región centroamericana. Obviamente el cambio climático pues representa un factor multiplicador a estas situaciones socioeconómicas, ambientales que ya atravesaba, sociales que ya atravesaba nuestros países centroamericanos. La prioridad de nuestros países centroamericanos es el desarrollo sostenible, la erradicación de la pobreza, la adaptación y el incremento de la resiliencia ante el cambio climático. Esta es una meta que nos hemos propuesto todos los países centroamericanos y son temas que como Comisión Centroamericana de Ambiente y Desarrollo vamos a tratar en la próxima semana en sesiones que vamos a tener la CCAD aquí en Glasgow. Es fundamental, pues, como hemos mencionado, mantener ese equilibrio ecológico de los ecosistemas para garantizar la provisión de sus bienes y servicios ambientales a nuestras comunidades, ya que su degradación y deterioro repercuten en el resurgimiento de nuevas amenazas y riesgos a la seguridad humana. Cualquier programa de recuperación económica que la región promueva debe buscar ser articulado con una efectiva gestión ambiental para garantizar la sostenibilidad y asegurar una respuesta integral a las problemáticas vigentes de desigualdad social, contaminación, degradación de los recursos naturales y crisis climática. Para hablarles un poquito de Panamá, definitivamente que cada país tiene sus particulares socioambientales y nosotros en Panamá a nivel integral estamos enfrentando estos efectos del cambio climático, pero en los 2 últimos años hemos hecho grandes esfuerzos y la sociedad panameña nos hemos puesto de acuerdo para enfrentar estas situaciones con el liderazgo del Ministerio de Ambiente. Creo que también, nunca se había logrado en tan poco tiempo, por ejemplo, unificarnos para lograr que la protección del 30% de nuestros océanos, y ya es una realidad, y eso era una aspiración de varios países a nivel mundial, de una iniciativa de hace 2 años, y nosotros el 8 de junio, el Día Mundial de los Océanos, lo logramos. 30% de nuestros océanos son protegidos con algún tipo de sistemas de áreas protegidas. También somos carbono negativo, pero aún así tenemos la meta no solamente para no perder esa negatividad en nuestro carbono, sino de, por ejemplo, en el sector de energía, ser 100% en el sector eléctrico, 100% generadores de energía limpia. En estos momentos estamos llegando al 70%. También hemos creado, que era una deuda de muchos años, y diríamos que Panamá era uno de los pocos países de Latinoamérica o quizás del mundo, que no teníamos un instituto hidrológico y meteorológico. Esas funciones se hacían a través de una institución. Ya por ley formamos nuestro Instituto Hidrológico y Meteorológico y dentro de pocos meses estamos inaugurando en un edificio las instalaciones del Instituto Hidrológico y Meteorológico de Panamá. También a nivel del Ministerio de Ambiente, con todas las instituciones pertinentes, el Sistema Nacional de Protección Civil y otras, estamos formulando y haciendo los mapas de riesgos de Panamá y también la organización para hacerle frente a estas consecuencias pues, de los efectos del cambio climático. Nosotros compartimos con los países centroamericanos a través de la Comisión Centroamericana de Ambiente y Desarrollo, la CCAD, las experiencias, nos apoyamos uno con otro y en equipo pues tenemos que hacerle frente porque a nivel de Centroamérica tenemos condiciones parecidas, ambientales, sociales y económicas. Entonces, en resumida, esta es la síntesis de lo que podemos decir que a nivel de Centroamérica y específicamente de Panamá estamos haciendo para hacerle frente pues, al cambio climático y ser más resilientes en nuestros países. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, ministro, por su intervención y ha sido muy oportuno el resaltar la importancia de articulación a nivel regional mediante el CABEI y el SICA. Hemos visto esfuerzos muy grandes y aunque, como usted menciona, los países tienen, digamos, problemas similares, pero economías también distintas, es muy bonito ver justamente cómo Centroamérica, y yo diría que le falta un poquito más a Sudamérica, seguir el ejemplo de ustedes de poder articularse y trabajar mucho más en conjunto con estas problemáticas que todos sufren del cambio climático. Ahora me gustaría darle la palabra al viceministro de Recursos Naturales y Cambio Climático de Guatemala, Freddy Chiroy. Agradeceríamos que compartas con la audiencia a su vez la importancia de esta articulación regional y cómo a nivel nacional están incorporando estrategias para luchar contra el cambio climático. Adelante, Freddy.
Buenas tardes, estimados colegas. Muy buenos días a todos los que nos ven a través de redes sociales en Centroamérica. Hoy en Glasgow hemos traído un mensaje claro y contundente a través de la presidencia pro tempore del CCAD, el cual coordina el ministro Mario Rojas Espino, y es que somos una región altamente vulnerable ante los efectos del cambio climático. Y no es solamente un discurso vacío o es un discurso que se repite en las diferentes conversaciones que tenemos, sino que las estadísticas nos amparan. Y lamentablemente también el número de fallecidos que en nuestra región centroamericana resulta a raíz de estos efectos y eventos del clima repercute en un solo mensaje. Y es que debemos ser reconocidos como una región altamente vulnerable. Tan solo en Guatemala, alrededor de 3.5 millones de personas se ven afectadas por eventos como las sequías, principalmente en la región del corredor seco. Somos considerados como uno de los países, el último informe de inteligencia de los Estados Unidos establece a Guatemala y a la región centroamericana dentro de 11 países altamente vulnerables ante los efectos climáticos. ¿Qué nos une? Nos une como región estas condiciones y esta posición que debemos de llevar en bloque ante la COP, en este caso, y generar esos recursos y ese financiamiento para la adaptación en nuestros países, que es muy importante. No solamente la reincorporación de esos recursos para mejorar la resiliencia en nuestras comunidades, principalmente en Guatemala, existe una alto porcentaje de población indígena, comunidades vulnerables que son afectadas. Lo mencionaba el ministro, en Guatemala tanto las tormentas ETA y OTA afectaron significativamente a nuestras comunidades y eso generó migración por temas relacionados a los efectos del cambio climático. Eso es importante analizarlo y contextualizarlo, porque estas acciones y estos proyectos que hemos recientemente aprobado por el Fondo del Clima en el corredor seco a nivel regional constituyen una alianza y una armonización de políticas a nivel sectoriales y a nivel de los diferentes estados que conforman la CCAD, a generar proyectos que incorporen ahora una recuperación verde post-COVID, que nos permitan generar mecanismos sustantivos y proyectos en vías de los más necesitados que son nuestras comunidades. Es por ello que hoy, a través de una sola voz y una portavoz, generamos ese mensaje de incidencia y sensibilización. Es un mensaje unificado que como región traemos a la COP26, que consideramos que deben existir más y mayores recursos, pero también algo muy importante es que estos recursos lleguen de forma eficiente y de forma ágil. Lamentablemente, muchas veces estos recursos llegan cuando los eventos climatológicos ya se dieron, ya impactaron y muchas veces son recursos nacionales de nuestros propios países que se deben de incorporar para lograr esa restitución de los eventos que se han sucedido. Guatemala de por sí ya invierte con fondos nacionales en programas de adaptación en el corredor seco. Tenemos proyectos tanto con agencias bilaterales y multilaterales que invierten en estas áreas y que significativamente estos proyectos van a venir a sumar y articular. A nivel de país, nosotros únicamente el año 2016 generamos 0.07% de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero. Es una cantidad no significativa. Sin embargo, tenemos compromisos adquiridos en el marco del Acuerdo de París en reducir nuestras emisiones en el 11.2% y 22.6% a nivel nacional, con ayuda de la cooperación internacional, al igual que otros países. Los compromisos se asumen y se adquieren y se están cumpliendo. Sin embargo, no vemos ese refinanciamiento de recursos financieros que puedan llegar a nuestros países y puedan generar esa recuperación y esa adaptación y esa resiliencia que tanto hace falta. Tenemos una ley de cambio climático, el decreto 7-2013, que nos permite generar incidencia no solamente a nivel sectorial, sino a nivel del sector privado, pueblos indígenas, género, la academia. Esa articulación de esfuerzos se logra a través de un Consejo Nacional de Cambio Climático, el cual tuvimos la oportunidad, después de 4 años de no llevarse a cabo, lograrlo presidir por el señor presidente de la República, el doctor Alejandro Yamatei, y asimismo el señor ministro Rojas Espino, y se lograron avances significativos en materia de adaptación al cambio climático y resiliencia. Estamos trabajando también en otro proyecto preparatorio con planes de adaptación departamentales, los cuales nos van a permitir identificar la vulnerabilidad a nivel departamental y formular diferentes proyectos que conlleven a presentarlos ante los diferentes fondos que se cuentan y lograr incidir en materia pública. Contamos con un plan de acción nacional de cambio climático, el cual fue actualizado en el 2018 y que nos ha permitido generar insumos importantes para la actualización de nuestra contribución nacionalmente determinada. También contamos con una estrategia de desarrollo con bajas emisiones, que es la visión a largo plazo que contamos como país y que nos va a permitir cumplir con las metas en el marco del Acuerdo de París. Agradecer este espacio y esta oportunidad. Una vez más recalco esta voz unificada que tenemos como región, que nos une como región y que nos permite incidir en los diferentes bloques de negociación en esta COP26. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, viceministro. Muy importante resaltar, ¿no?, cómo tienen estructurado en Guatemala, ¿no?, desde lo más alto, que es una ley, hasta todos estos planes y estrategias concretas que además, como menciona, se van actualizando en el tiempo, ya que desafortunadamente cada vez nos damos cuenta que el cambio climático es más fuerte y afecta cada vez más a vuestras poblaciones. Además, hemos visto que Guatemala, desafortunadamente, como muchos otros países de la región, ha venido sufriendo de los efectos de huracanes violentos que afectan sobre todo a las personas más vulnerables. Voy a pasar otra vez a inglés. I'm going to switch again into English and do a couple of follow-up questions to our panel members. And then I will open the floor to the audience in case of they have some. I would like to come back to Jacqueline from UNEP. And we would like to hear from you, Jacqueline, because we understand that UNEP played a fundamental role in this program, mainly providing technical assistance and support to CABEI, the entity leading the program. And this is very important, as mentioned before, for the GCF, providing and proving how these international entities are supporting direct access entity to access directly to the GCF resources. So can you please share with the audience more details and how this support was provided and fundamental to the success of this program? And we will appreciate to hear from you as well how UNEP is planning to continue supporting other direct access entities to develop, implement, and monitor GCF resources and bringing to the table paradigm-shifting projects such as the one we're speaking today on the dry corridor. Jacqueline.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you well, and we can see you as well.
So thank you very much for the question. And should I do it in English or in Spanish? Which language do you prefer?
You can continue in English.
Okay. So UNEP, as you know, is a science-based organization. And for us, helping and supporting countries in finding facts is the first step. So in this particular project, that is how it started. We gathered together the different situations, the different data, the numbers, brought also the different stakeholders and the people to talk into the same table. So that's the second thing that we do at UNEP. So the first one, science-based, fact-finding. The second one is putting the right audience together so that we can really have a meaningful dialogue with those that can have impact and those that really can make a difference. So with that, the team here in UNEP supported all along the process and the work towards getting into those big building blocks or milestones that were needed for the project to advance. The collaboration between the finance sector and the facts, it's also key. And that's something that UNEP does as part of its main objective and role, in bringing in the finance initiatives, the different perspectives. We are very interested overall to have sustainable impacts, meaning that once the project is developed, implemented, and finalized, how things will continue. And there is where it's key to have the banks, for example, in this case, but also the political people understanding the impact beyond the situation and beyond a project as such. How are we going to continue working? We are ready to support. We are ready to help. This project in particular has implementing partners, executing partners that will be working, but we stand ready and behind and in front as you need for continuous work and collaboration. This is not ending after the project will end, as you know. The dry corridor is a big problem, and it brings the different dimensions of sustainability, different SDG targets. It will address poverty, migration. It will address tools. It will address different areas. So for us, being the glue, being the bridge on those things is really key and essential. So count on UNEP for working together with you. Over.
Very much, Jacqueline, and I believe that a lot of other direct access entities would be pleased to work with UNEP and get that technical support and knowledge to be able to share additional projects with the GCF and other CAMET resources. Now, I would like to ask a follow-up questions to the Deputy Director of the GCF on the Division of Mitigation and Adaptation. Tabitha, we have seen, and it's clear on the website of the GCF, that Latin America and the Caribbean have less projects, almost around half of the total projects approved comparing to Africa and Asia and Pacific. Could you please share with us your thoughts on why Latin America and the Caribbean are steps behind the amount of resources and projects approved by the GCF? And if you can share with us a couple of examples of other ambitious programs such as this one that are being revised or reviewed by the GCF Secretariat, and that hopefully in the close future, these countries will benefit. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. For some facts, as I mentioned, as on date, GCF has committed $10 billion of direct GCF funding to projects of a total value of $37 billion. Of this, $2.5 billion of GCF funding is committed to the Latin American and Caribbean region, so which is 25% of the total commitment. As part of the updated strategic plan, GCF also wants to have, is required to have a regional balance. And the regions in which we work includes Latin American, Caribbean, Africa, Asia Pacific, as well as Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So in that sense, I would say on a portfolio basis, we do have a pretty balanced portfolio so far in terms of regional representation. We have, in the couple of last board meetings, it is true that the share of the Latin American Caribbean was lower, and that's a fact. However, we are glad that we were able to make up for some of those through projects such as the Dry Corridor. We also approved this year another CABEI project, which was the Costa Rica LRT project. These two are large projects. The Costa Rica LRT project is mobilizing about $1.9 billion of private capital, and the GCF funding to that is $271 million. Yes. Right? So these are large projects. Large projects do have the challenge of taking longer to design, and they are more complex. So that's one reason. Also, as part of the GCF's mandate, as I said, we are required to have 50-50% balance between adaptation and mitigation. And of the adaptation portion, our mandate is to ensure at least 50% of that goes to SIDS, LDCs, and Africa. So these are various different strategic objective requirements of GCF, which we are trying to balance. This is not to say that we aren't going to focus more and make sure that continues to be a good geographic balance. We also have some good multi-sectoral projects that have been approved recently, which includes a good number of countries from the Latin American Caribbean region. One is the SNCF, which is a subnational climate investment fund, which invests in mitigation technologies at a subnational level, which is at a city municipal level. And we are hoping that, again, it's a private sector funding. We are hoping a lot of the countries that are participating in it, 42 countries, it's a subnational fund across 42 countries, so we're hoping that some of that projects will come as well. Recently, we also approved the CRAFT project, which is for climate resilience and adaptation fund. These are equity fund investments for technology transfer. Again, we are hoping that it's, again, multi-country, including some of the Latin American countries. So we're hoping that through initiatives such as this, the Latin American and Caribbean countries will benefit in the future as well. And we look forward to working with them through supporting through the Readiness Grant and PPF projects to develop more projects. Again, the Dry Corridor project also benefited from our PPF support to bring this high-quality proposal to GCF for funding, and that enables a success. So hopefully, with a combination of support, some of these will be addressed.
Thank you very much, Kavita, for that. And I would like to highlight what you mentioned at the end, that the GCF has as well different kind of windows of support. No, it's not only the big one for the projects and programs, but there is the readiness program that each country has up to $1 million per year to build the capacities and develop good projects and programs. I would like to highlight that Latin America and the Caribbean is the region that has the most regional readiness programs, what proves the ambition of building this pipeline of regional projects or programs for the future. We have seen readiness such as for e-mobility with UNEP, on agriculture with the ICA, the Institute of Agriculture of Central America and the Caribbean. We have seen other regional programs coming to the GCF that will build additional proposals. And we know that for the close future, some of the countries have ambition of developing readiness programs on hydrogen, for example, the carbon markets, among other initiatives. So it's really good to highlight that the region of Latin America and the Caribbean are as well using these resources to be able to build a most ambitious pipeline of projects and programs. Miguel, as Kavita mentioned, there's this other window of the project preparation facility at the GCF that CABEI has already used, for example, for the electric train in Costa Rica. But we heard that you're following that great example of the need of developing the studies itself. Generally, a lot of the countries have a great idea, a plan, a strategy, but they don't have the resources or the ways to develop what is needed to transform an idea to a full funding proposal. So you have used this facility of the GCF, but we heard on your speech that CABEI itself has developed a fund for preparation of projects for innovation on climate change. Could you please share with the audience and the ministers a little bit more details on this facility that we believe is really important for the countries, private sectors, and others willing to access to full resources thanks to this kind of initiatives? Miguel, the floor is yours.
Apologies, can I just make one correction before that?
Yes, Kavita, please go ahead.
I misspoke. It was not the Dry Corridor that received the PPF support. It was the LRT Costa Rica project. So I misspoke. Apologies for that.
Don't worry. Apologies more than accepted. Thank you. Miguel, can you please share with us a little bit more of this initiative that CABEI has developed?
Yeah, perfect. Sorry. So, yes, basically what we have now is that there is limitation on capacity to develop projects. So, but this limitation is not only for larger projects, but also is for some pre-feasibility studies and then for feasibility studies. So in that regard, we want to complement also the option that we have with the GCF PPF facility, because with PPF we can access to resources for larger projects. So then the cap is up to $1.5 million for preparation of a project, while in our project preparation facility, we basically look for projects that will need around $500,000 US. So in that regard, we will have enough resources to support more projects. And this is one of the issues why Latin America doesn't have more projects in the GCF. That's basically because there is not the resources to prepare projects, and also the speed to get access to that. So this project preparation facility that we have now launched will help in this. And in that regard, I would like to say to the minister here that CABEI proposed this for you, for the countries. So then we can work together in order to prepare the projects that we need in order to avoid problems in the future. Because you said, Vice Minister of Guatemala, that you have the emergency. Yeah, but then we are now, in this case, we are reacting. But maybe we can go in the other way around. So be proactive. And that, in that regard, so CABEI put aside these resources in order to support the countries to be proactive for climate change events in the future.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for sharing this opportunity for the countries to be able to develop in more details what it's needed to get to additional resources. Diciendo esto, voy a pasar a español para aprovechar del ministro y el viceministro. Como mencionaba Miguel, no solamente el GCF, el Fondo Verde del Clima, tiene una facilidad de preparación de proyectos hasta 1.5 millones de dólares. También el BCIE ha desarrollado una facilidad similar para poder ayudar a los países a desarrollar los estudios de factibilidad, las consultas con las comunidades, análisis de riesgo, de género, entre otras que son necesarias para poder acceder a recursos. Dicho esto, ¿qué tipo de prioridades, sean nacionales o regionales, consideran ustedes dos fundamentales a las cuales pudieran acceder a este tipo de recursos para desarrollar los estudios necesarios y poder acceder a mayores recursos, en este caso del Fondo Verde del Clima? Ministro de Panamá, escuchamos sus ideas de qué tipo de proyectos ambiciosos se pudieran desarrollar a nivel nacional o regional accediendo a este tipo de facilidades.
Sí, a pesar de que hay muchos problemas similares, hay algunas individualidades, pero en términos generales creo que la mayoría o el total de los proyectos son afines a todos nuestros países. Nos interesa mucho las medidas de adaptación al sector agropecuario por la seguridad alimentaria. El sector agropecuario a los efectos del cambio climático es muy sensitivo porque estamos hablando de la comida de nuestra población y no podemos estar dependiendo. La pandemia nos indicó, nos enseñó a todos que si el mundo se paraliza la comercialización de los alimentos. Entonces cada país tiene que ser autosuficiente en la producción de alimentos, porque no sabemos qué pasa en el futuro, inclusive con estos efectos del cambio climático, sin hablar de otras pandemias y sin hablar de otras situaciones económicas o políticas a nivel del planeta Tierra. Entonces, creo que los proyectos de adaptación al cambio climático del sector agropecuario son muy importantes para todos nuestros países. También los estudios al incremento del nivel del mar. En muchos de nuestros países ya se está viendo el efecto del incremento del nivel del mar. Por ejemplo, en Panamá ya tenemos algunas islas del Caribe, del Atlántico, que, por ejemplo, en la comarca Gunayala, que es una comarca indígena, hay una isla que ya se está cubriendo del agua del mar. Y hay un proceso ahora para cambiar o reubicar a nuestros indígenas de algunas islas a tierra firme. Al igual que en el Pacífico, y lo están viviendo muchos países, los embates del incremento del nivel del mar está haciendo que poblaciones costeñas sean afectadas. Entonces es importante también dirigir recursos, estudios para atender ese tema en las áreas costeras, también la reubicación de personas o poblados que están en lugares susceptibles a inundaciones de los ríos. Recordemos que uno de los efectos del cambio climático es que en poco tiempo cae mucha más agua que el historial, y en ese poco tiempo se inundan planicies que antes se inundaban en 50 o en 100 años, ahora se están inundando cada 5 años. Entonces, esos son los aspectos que también son afines a la mayoría de los países de Centroamérica, y los poblados, los estudios para los poblados que están abajo de las laderas de las montañas, que por deslizamiento de las montañas, por alta precipitación y mal uso del suelo, están sepultando viviendas, comunidades, y tenemos en la región muchos muertos por ese tema. Así que diríamos que esos 4 aspectos son comunes para la región centroamericana y cada uno de nuestros países.
Muchísimas gracias, ministro, por esas luces de temas tan relevantes y fundamentales, no solamente para Panamá, sino para Centroamérica. De hecho, yo tengo la fortuna de haberme mudado recientemente a Panamá, y ese es el tema, por ejemplo, que mencionaba al inicio de la seguridad alimenticia es fundamental, ¿no? De hecho, se vieron un incremento de los precios de la alimentación en Panamá por lo de la pandemia, y yo puedo decir que después de haber vivido en muchas regiones del mundo, incluyendo en Europa y, por ejemplo, en Corea en su momento cuando trabajaba en el GCF, de hecho, hacer mercado en Panamá es más costoso que en países como España o Corea, ¿no? Y eso para personas que tenemos la suerte, ¿no?, de poder escoger lo que uno compra. Pero las pobres comunidades, ¿no?, que ven estos incrementos de precios en la alimentación, pues esto genera consecuencias gravísimas, como puede ser la malnutrición de los niños en este caso. Entonces, es fundamental el desarrollar medidas de adaptación para el sector agrícola y poder motivar y incentivar a la economía a nivel nacional para que se alimenten de sus propios productos, lo cual también reduce el impacto del cambio climático, porque así se importan menos productos y se aprovechan a nivel nacional. Dicho eso, viceministro, nos quedan unos minutos de Guatemala. Nos encantaría escuchar de ti, Freddy, cuáles serían esas prioridades a nivel nacional o regional, complementando lo que dijo el ministro de Panamá, y que se pudieran aprovechar de esos recursos de preparación de proyectos. Adelante, viceministro.
Sí, muchas gracias. Como lo mencionaba, nosotros en Guatemala tenemos una política nacional de cambio climático, una ley de cambio climático y un plan de acción nacional de cambio climático, donde hemos priorizado 6 sectores, dentro de los cuales está agricultura, zonas marinos costeras, recursos hídricos, áreas protegidas, infraestructura y el sector de salud. Es bien importante porque también recientemente en nuestro proceso de actualización de NDC hemos también establecido metas enfocadas al sector de adaptación, en donde hemos identificado diferentes proyectos en corto y mediano plazo que hemos trabajado de forma sectorial con el Instituto Nacional de Bosques, Consejo Nacional de Áreas Protegidas, Ministerio de Agricultura, Ganadería y Alimentación, que van a permitir fomentar las capacidades de adaptación en las diferentes comunidades, municipios y departamentos de la República de Guatemala. Hemos priorizado el sector de seguridad alimentaria, como también lo expresaba el señor ministro de Panamá, debido a la importancia. Nosotros somos un país altamente agrícola, que dependemos mucho del comercio interno, y debido a los efectos del cambio climático, muchas veces en temas de inundación, los sistemas de riego son afectados significativamente en las comunidades, pero también en época de sequía, como le mencionaba, alrededor de 3.5 millones de personas son afectadas. Se ve afectada los sistemas, digamos, de captación de agua de lluvia, y eso es bien importante, fomentar, digamos, esos reservorios y esa recarga hídrica para que pueda existir los diferentes elementos sustantivos en el riego, en la agricultura y la seguridad alimentaria de nuestras comunidades, principalmente en los pueblos indígenas. También hay que considerar que Guatemala tiene alrededor de 33% de su territorio como área protegida. Mucho de ello están los bosques y la biodiversidad. Somos considerados como uno de los países más megadiversos, entre los 20 países más megadiversos que existen en el mundo. Y también estamos apelando a la conservación de la biodiversidad que tenemos en Guatemala. Asimismo, en las zonas marino-costeras contamos con una mesa técnica que se enfoca, digamos, en los avances que pueda tener. Debido a la desembocadura que tenemos en el Atlántico, tenemos zonas marino-costeras importantes en los arrecifes de coral, donde hemos visualizado diferentes proyectos que nos pueden permitir formularlos y presentarlos ante el Fondo Verde del Clima y otros fondos que se tienen acceso. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, viceministro. Y vale la pena rescatar lo que mencionaban, ¿no?, de las zonas costeras. En la última junta, el Fondo Verde para el Clima también aprobó un proyecto internacional con un fondo de inversión que se llama Pegasus, que justamente es un fondo dedicado a las zonas de corales. Se llama el Coral Reef Fund. Sabemos que sus países hacen parte de este proyecto. Así que es muy bueno también tener esas oportunidades, no solamente a estudios necesarios para proyectos en particular, sino que ya tienen acceso a proyectos internacionales o programas internacionales en los cuales el GCF ha dado recursos, en este caso, para un tema tan importante como son los corales. Bueno, dado que se nos está acabando el tiempo, I would like to again switch into English. And just ask CABEI for a couple of few last words for the panel and the audience. And Miguel, as the organizer of this event, we will appreciate just a last message from you. Thank you very much. Go ahead, CABEI.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for having GCF here. I also want to reiterate GCF's commitment for supporting adaptation and resilience in the Latin American Caribbean region, and the fact that GCF has multiple resources available, and we look forward to a great partnership with all the direct access entities and implementing partners here to be able to continue supporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, CABEI. Miguel, can you please close the session with some last words?
Oh, first of all, thanks to everyone for being here. And basically, the message for the countries is, we, as CABEI, we are here for support you. So at the end, you own the bank. So then we can help you and then just ask the support that you need in order to address the needs that the countries have. And of course, within our mandate that we have. Thank you very much, and see you next year.
Thank you very much, Miguel, CABEI, Minister of Panama and Vice Minister of Guatemala, and the audience for your time and interest in this very important program that we will see some results, as Miguel mentioned, very soon under the implementation and support of other international entities. Thank you for your time, and we wish you the best of luck at the end of this COP and implementing all these resources that you have achieved to receive. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Gracias.